Hello and welcome back. Today's explainer is all about a complete paradigm shift regarding those incredibly stressful product launches. You know the feeling, right? For so many creators and business owners, launching a product literally feels like standing at the edge of a cliff, just praying you can build a parachute on the way down. But as our sources today show us, it absolutely does not have to be that way. We're going to completely deconstruct the mechanics of a truly sustainable launch and look at exactly why our traditional view of this whole process is, well, pretty flawed. Okay, let's dive into this. Over on the left, we've got this massive, anxiety-inducing myth that plagues so many of us. The idea that a launch is just this single make-or-break moment. It's that feeling that the second you hit publish or send that one email, everything depends on that exact tick of the clock. But if we look to the right, the reality, and honestly the much more sustainable way to do this, is that a launch is actually a structured shape. It's got dimensions, it has a timeline, and it's a deliberate process. It's not just a frantic push of a button. And that brings us right into Section 1, a shape, not a moment. Let's look at the actual mechanics of these sustainable launches. Treating launch day as the only day that matters is a massive strategic error. Seriously, it's a trap because it leads us to completely underprepare for the phase that actually does the heavy lifting. The lead-up does the most persuasive work, period. If you're only focusing on the day the cart opens, you're missing the entire foundation that makes someone actually want to buy from you in the first place. So to stop fixating on that single day, let's move into Section 2, the 3 launch phases, and break down the tactical mechanics you need to follow. And this brilliantly illustrates how a sustainable launch is constructed in 3 very distinct phases. First up, we've got the pre-launch running for roughly 1 to 2 weeks. Then we hit the open cart. This is that specific high-energy window when people can actually buy, usually lasting between 3 and 7 days. And finally, we have the post-launch period. This is where you're following up with the folks who didn't buy and jumping into delivery for the ones who did. As you can see, the work is distributed across all 3 of these phases. It's not just crammed into 24 hours. I want to pause specifically on the pre-launch for a second because, as we just established, this is where the persuasion happens. This entire phase is dedicated to building anticipation and addressing your audience's objections way before the cart actually opens. This is exactly where the critical groundwork for a successful open cart is laid. Honestly, if you skip this, your open cart phase is going to fall completely flat. But who exactly are we speaking to during this 3-phase timeline? That brings us to Section 3. Warm versus cold audiences, and how we handle our targeting. We really have to clearly contrast the behavior of our 2 main audience types here. Over on the left, we have the warm audience. These are your people. They've been engaging with your content and reading your emails for weeks. It's incredibly realistic to expect a meaningful chunk of them to actually consider buying. On the right, though, we have the cold audience. These are folks encountering you for the absolute first time during a launch. And the stark reality? Cold audiences rarely buy immediately. They need a lot of nurturing first. So the crucial point is pretty undeniable here. When you're planning a first launch, your primary focus absolutely must be on that massive slice of the pie right there, your warm audience. Even if that warm audience feels small to you right now, they are the ones who convert. You simply cannot expect strangers, that tiny little slice of cold audience, to just magically convert on first contact. You've got to spend your energy where it actually counts. Knowing that our focus is strictly on that warm audience, let's move to Section 4, crafting the communication plan. This is your blueprint. Listen, during a launch, your absolute worst enemy is vague intentions. Saying to yourself, oh, I'll just post about it a few times, absolutely does not work. The launch window itself is incredibly emotionally taxing. If you're waking up in the middle of open cart, scrambling to figure out what you're going to say that day, decision fatigue is going to crush you. Having a concrete plan, that is your shield against the fatigue. A proper launch plan literally leaves nothing to chance. Look at this structure. It specifies exactly which day you are communicating, which specific channel you're using, like is this an email or a social post, and exactly what the core message of that individual touchpoint is going to be. Setting this up completely removes the guesswork when the pressure is actually on. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we break down that core message column. To build a highly persuasive narrative, there are usually these 8 distinct angles you've got to cover. You start by outlining the problem, showing the transformation, and then explaining exactly how the thing works. You clarify who it's for, and just as importantly, who it is not for. You tackle objections head on, you sprinkle in social proof if you've got it, and finally, you bring in that urgency or deadline, leading right into your final call to action. And All of this strategy leads us to our final and honestly most overlooked twist in marketing. Section 5, the whole person lens, focusing on the human being behind the launch. I want to take a second and just validate what many of you might be feeling when you think about all this. It is completely normal to feel intense, overwhelming pressure during a launch. And why is that? Because this is often the very first moment your business identity is being tested by a real external response. You're putting something you poured your heart into out into the world, and the market is going to react. That is a heavy, heavy emotional load to carry. Because of that external test, launch week often drags up very specific emotional triggers with some pretty unusual intensity. You can fully anticipate old money story fears bubbling up to the surface, right alongside some really deep identity doubts. You have to plan for this emotionally, not just logistically. You can't just schedule your emails in advance and then completely ignore your own mental well-being during this window. Let's move to and see how this builds into an actual personal support structure, which you need to do before you even finalize your marketing. Step 1, establish an accountability structure. Know exactly who you're going to call in advance if it's a tough day. Step 2, define your minimum viable week. Your schedule is going to need to flex during launch week, so figure out what absolute minimum tasks must get done and give yourself permission to let the rest go. And step 3, already have 1 to 2 post-launch recovery days completely blocked off on your calendar, regardless of how the launch goes. I want to pause on this thought for just a moment because this really serves as the ultimate emotional anchor for any creator going through this process. Your worth is not determined by this single launch's results. Seriously, let that sink in. A launch is just data. It's a shape, it's a structure, it's an experiment. It is absolutely not a reflection of your value as a human being. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want you to look at your current strategy and challenge yourself with this final provocative thought. Are you planning a launch or just a launch day? Because by shifting your focus to the entire shape, the pre-launch, the warm audience, the precise messaging, and your own emotional support, you actually transform a moment of total panic into a sustainable system for growth. Thanks so much for diving into this with us. Take this framework, apply it to your next big project, and just watch the difference a structured shape can make.